The church bells of Desdemona, Texas rang solemnly as Virginia Reynolds stood alone at the altar, the ivory lace of her wedding dress catching the late afternoon sunlight that streamed through the stained glass windows. The pews behind her sat empty, except for the minister and his wife, serving as witnesses to what should have been the happiest day of her life, but now felt like just another painful reminder of all she had lost. The spring of 1875 had been cruel to Virginia. First, her parents' sudden passing in a fire that consumed their small homestead, followed by her brother's death at the hands of bandits while traveling to Desdemona for the funeral. Now, she was marrying a man she'd corresponded with for months, but never met in person, her last desperate attempt to forge a future from the ashes of her past. "Does anyone object to this union?" the minister asked, his voice echoing in the nearly empty church. The creak of the church doors made Virginia turn, her heart skipping a beat as she expected to see her groom, Albert Fletcher, finally arriving after keeping her waiting for over an hour. Instead, a tall stranger stood in the doorway, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the blazing Texas sun. As he stepped inside, removing his hat, Virginia could see he was perhaps 30 years old, with sun-weathered skin and kind eyes that seemed to take in the scene with quiet understanding. "I reckon I'm interrupting," the man said, his voice deep and gentle. "I was told there was to be a wedding and I'm looking for Albert Fletcher." Virginia felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "You're not the only one." The minister cleared his throat. "Mr. Fletcher has not arrived, sir. Miss Reynolds has been waiting for quite some time." The stranger's expression darkened. "That's so." He approached slowly, boots echoing on the wooden floor. "Name's Cole Owens, madam. I work Albert's cattle drive. I was sent to fetch him, but it seems he's not here either." Virginia's hands trembled as she clutched her small bouquet of wildflowers. "Perhaps he's simply delayed." Cole's eyes met hers, and something in them made her stomach tighten. "Miss Reynolds, I believe I should speak with you privately." The minister's wife, Mrs. Daniels, stepped forward. "Whatever you have to say can be said here, young man." Cole looked down at his hat in his hands, turning it slowly. "I wish that were so, madam." He fixed his gaze on Virginia again. "Miss Reynolds, Albert Fletcher left town 3 days ago. He sold his ranch and took the money. Word at the saloon is he headed for California with a widow from Dallas." The church fell silent except for the sound of Virginia's bouquet hitting the floor, wildflower petals scattering across the polished wood. She had traveled hundreds of miles on the promise of marriage, sold what little remained of her family's possessions, and now stood abandoned in a town where she knew no one. "I'm sorry, miss," Cole said, stepping closer, genuine regret in his eyes. "Fletcher left all the ranch hands without pay as well. We're all looking for him, though not for friendly reasons." Virginia struggled to maintain her composure, but a single tear escaped, trailing down her cheek. "I have no money to return east, no family left anywhere." Her voice was barely above a whisper. Cole Owens stared at the beautiful woman in white, abandoned at the altar. Without thinking, he moved forward and picked up the fallen bouquet, carefully gathering the scattered flowers. As he handed them back to her, their fingers brushed, and he made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "The bride had no family left," Cole said, his voice firm yet gentle as he looked from Virginia to the minister. "Then mine becomes yours starting right now, this moment." Virginia's eyes widened. "I beg your pardon, my mother, my sisters, my cousins, they're good people with a small ranch outside of town. Until you figure out what you want to do, they're your family now. I'll not see a lady stranded with nowhere to turn." The minister frowned. "Mr. Owens, while your offer is generous, it's not charity," Cole interrupted, his eyes never leaving Virginia's face. It's what decent folks do for each other out here. The West isn't kind to those who stand alone. Virginia studied the man before her. He wasn't proposing marriage or making improper suggestions. He was offering something she desperately needed: a safe harbor in a storm. Why would you do this for a stranger? Cole's weathered face softened. Because 8 years ago, I was stranded in Colorado with nothing but the clothes on my back after a mining accident. A family took me in until I could stand on my own 2 feet again. I swore I'd do the same if I ever had the chance. Mrs. Daniels stepped forward. I'll accompany Miss Reynolds to meet your family first, Mr. Owens. As a chaperone, Cole nodded. I'd expect nothing less, madam. Virginia carefully wiped away her tears, straightened her shoulders, and extended her hand to Cole. I accept your kindness, Mr. Owens, until I can make other arrangements. As Cole's calloused hand enveloped hers in a gentle handshake, neither could have predicted how their lives would intertwine in the days to come, or that the abandoned bride and the honorable cowboy would find in each other what they never knew they were searching for. The Owens family ranch sat nestled in a gentle valley 5 miles outside Desdemona. As the wagon carrying Virginia, Cole, and Mrs. Daniels approached the modest 2-story farmhouse, Virginia was struck by the neat fencing and well-tended gardens surrounding the property. It wasn't a grand estate, but it radiated something her parents' home had possessed: the unmistakable feeling of being cared for. It's not much, Cole said, noting her gaze, but it's home. The front door opened before they'd fully stopped, and a woman in her 50s emerged, wiping flour-covered hands on her apron. Her gray-streaked dark hair was pinned in a practical bun, and her face, though lined with years of Texas sun, held the same kind eyes as her son. Cole Owens, you've been gone since dawn, she called out, then paused as she registered the unexpected guests. What's this now? Cole helped Virginia down from the wagon, conscious of her wedding dress and the awkwardness of the situation. Mama, this is Miss Virginia Reynolds. She needs our help for a spell. And this is Mrs. Daniels, the minister's wife. Hannah Owens took in the wedding dress, the tear-stained face, and the solemn expression of Mrs. Daniels, and immediately understood more than her son had explained. Without hesitation, she stepped forward and took Virginia's hands in hers. Whatever brought you here doesn't matter right now, Hannah said warmly. You look like you could use a cup of tea and a quiet place to collect yourself. Come inside, dear. 2 young women appeared in the doorway behind Hannah Cole's sisters, Mary and Elizabeth, both with their brother's dark hair and curious expressions. As Hannah ushered Virginia inside, Cole explained the situation to his sisters in hushed tones. The interior of the Owens home was modest but comfortable, with handmade quilts draped over sturdy furniture, and shelves lined with books, a rarity in frontier homes. Virginia was led to a chair by the fireplace while Hannah prepared tea. Mrs. Daniels, satisfied that the Owens family was indeed respectable, agreed to return to town after extracting promises from Hannah that Virginia's reputation would be carefully guarded. I'll return tomorrow to check on you, Miss Reynolds, Mrs. Daniels said, patting Virginia's hand. The church has a small fund for those in need. I'll speak with my husband about it. After Mrs. Daniels departed, Hannah served tea while Mary and Elizabeth tried not to stare at Virginia's wedding dress. Cole had stepped outside to tend to the horses, giving the women privacy. Now then, Hannah said, settling across from Virginia, let's talk about getting you comfortable. Elizabeth is closest to your size. She can lend you some clothing until we sort things out. Virginia's hand trembled slightly as she held her teacup. I don't know how to thank you for such kindness to a stranger. Hannah's expression softened. We were all strangers once in this country. My late husband and I came west with nothing but a wagon and dreams. The only reason we survived was the kindness of others." She glanced toward the window where Cole could be seen leading the horses to the barn. "My son has a good heart, always has." "He mentioned being helped by a family in Colorado," Virginia said. Hannah nodded. "After his father died, Cole went to the mines hoping to strike it rich and save our farm. Nearly died himself in a cave-in. If not for the family that took him in during his recovery, I might have lost him too." Her eyes focused on Virginia again. "So you see, we understand what it means to be alone in the world." Virginia felt the first genuine ease since the disastrous wedding ceremony. "I had family until very recently. Now I find myself entirely alone." "Not anymore," Elizabeth said suddenly, her young face serious. "At least not for now." That evening, Virginia changed into borrowed clothes and helped prepare dinner. The simple act of cutting vegetables and kneading dough alongside Hannah and the girls gave her a sense of normalcy that had been absent for months. When Cole and his younger cousin Thomas returned from the fields, they brought fresh laughter and stories to the dinner table. As Virginia lay in bed that night, in Mary and Elizabeth's shared room where they had insisted she take Mary's bed, she reflected on the strange turn her life had taken. She had arrived in Desdemona expecting to become a wife. Instead, she had been abandoned by her intended groom but embraced by strangers who asked nothing in return for their kindness. For the first time since receiving news of her parents' death, Virginia fell asleep without the weight of loneliness pressing on her chest. The following days established a routine. Virginia insisted on earning her keep, rising early to help with breakfast and household chores. Mrs. Daniels visited as promised, bringing the church's modest offering and news that she had written to the sheriff in the last town Albert Fletcher was seen, though she held little hope of recovering Virginia's money. On the third day, Virginia was hanging laundry in the yard when Cole approached, leading his horse. "Miss Reynolds," he said, removing his hat, "I'm riding into town for supplies. I wondered if you might want to accompany me. Perhaps there are things you need." Virginia hesitated. She had barely left the house since arriving, partly from embarrassment at her situation and partly because the Owens home felt like a safe haven. "I should help your mother with dinner preparations," she replied. Cole smiled. "Mama suggested I invite you. Said you've been working too hard and need some fresh air." Virginia looked down at her borrowed dress. "I have nothing suitable to wear into town. Folks around here don't much care about fancy clothes," Cole said gently. "But if it concerns you, Mary left out her Sunday dress for you. Said you're welcome to it." An hour later, Virginia found herself riding beside Cole in the family's small wagon. She wore Mary's blue dress, which had been hastily altered to fit her taller frame. Her hair was pinned beneath a modest bonnet borrowed from Hannah. The ride to town gave Virginia her first real opportunity to observe the Texas landscape. Spring had painted the rolling hills with wildflowers, and the occasional oak tree provided islands of shade in the vast sea of grass. It was beautiful in its wild way, so different from the crowded streets of Pittsburgh where she had grown up. "Your family has been incredibly kind," Virginia said, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "I don't know how I'll ever repay such generosity." Cole kept his eyes on the road. "No repayment necessary. Though Mama does seem happier with another woman around the house. She misses female company since my sisters are usually busy with their own work." Mary mentioned she teaches at the schoolhouse. Cole nodded. "She does. Elizabeth helps Thomas with the cattle most days. They've been inseparable since childhood." "And you?" Virginia asked, genuinely curious about the man who had so dramatically altered her fate. "What did you do before working for Mr. Fletcher? A shadow crossed Cole's face. After Colorado, I drifted for a while. Worked cattle drives from Texas to Kansas. When Mama wrote that she was struggling with the ranch, I came home. He glanced at her. Fletcher's job paid better than what our small spread could offer, so I took it to send money home. Now I'm back to working our land. I'm sorry you lost your position because of him, Virginia said softly. Cole shrugged. Men like Fletcher don't last long out here. The West has a way of sorting out the honorable from the dishonorable. He paused, then asked gently, if it's not too forward, how did you come to be engaged to him? Virginia sighed. After my parents died, I placed an advertisement in a marriage gazette. Mr. Fletcher and I corresponded for months. His letters were. She hesitated, embarrassed now at how easily she had been deceived. His letters were kind and thoughtful. He described his ranch and his hopes for a family. It seemed a providential solution to my situation. Mail-order arrangements work out well for many, Cole said without judgment. Fletcher's character flaw isn't a reflection on your decision. As they approached Desdemona, Virginia's anxiety returned. The small town consisted of just one main street with wooden buildings lining both sides, a general store, saloon, blacksmith, small hotel, and the church where she had been left waiting. She hadn't returned since that humiliating day. We needn't stay long, Cole assured her, sensing her discomfort. Just supplies and any personal items you might need. The general store was blessedly empty when they entered, except for the proprietor, Mr. Jenkins, who greeted Cole warmly and eyed Virginia with undisguised curiosity. Miss Reynolds is staying with my family for a time, Cole explained simply, heading off the inevitable questions. Mr. Jenkins nodded. Pleasure to make your acquaintance, miss. We don't get many new faces in Desdemona. While Cole arranged for feed and supplies, Virginia browsed the modest selection of fabric, thread, and women's necessities. She had only the few dollars Mrs. Daniels had brought from the church fund, but she wanted to purchase something to show her appreciation to the Owens women. Please add these to our order, Cole said, appearing beside her as she held a spool of blue ribbon and some sewing needles. And anything else Miss Reynolds would like. Mr. Owens, that's not necessary, Virginia protested quietly. Consider it an advance, he replied. Mama mentioned you're quite skilled with a needle. She has mending that's piled up for months. Virginia recognized the offer for what it was, a way to help her maintain dignity while accepting assistance. She nodded gratefully and selected a few more practical items. As they left the store, a group of men emerged from the saloon across the street. One called out, "Hey, Owens, that Fletcher's mail-order bride you're squiring around." Virginia froze, mortification washing over her. Cole's hand touched her elbow gently, guiding her toward the wagon. "Keep walking," he murmured. "Some men's tongues get loose with whiskey. Here she came all the way from Pennsylvania just to get jilted." Another voice shouted, followed by coarse laughter. Cole's jaw tightened, but he continued helping Virginia into the wagon. The men, emboldened by Cole's apparent disregard, crossed the street toward them. "Maybe she'd like some company now that Fletcher's run off," said the first man, a burly fellow with a scraggly beard. "Might be nice having a city girl around." Cole finished securing their purchases, then turned slowly to face the men. "Miss Reynolds is under my family's protection, Davidson. I suggest you and your friends return to your drinks and forget you saw us." Davidson smirked. "Protection, is it? That what they're calling it these days?" Virginia saw the change in Cole's posture, the subtle shift of weight, the tensing of shoulders. Before she could protest, Cole had crossed the short distance to Davidson and grabbed the man's shirt collar, his voice low but carrying clearly in the sudden silence of the street. "You will apologize to the lady, and then you will never speak of or to her again." Is that clear? Davidson's companions backed away, suddenly finding interest in the dirt street. Davidson himself, though larger than Cole, seemed to recognize something dangerous in the cowboy's eyes. "No offense meant," Davidson muttered, glancing at Virginia. "Sorry, madam." Cole released him with a slight push and returned to the wagon. Without another word, he took the reins and guided the horses away from town, his knuckles white with tension. They had traveled nearly a mile before Cole spoke. "I apologize you had to experience that, Miss Reynolds. Small towns can be cruel to outsiders." Virginia studied his profile, noting the muscles still jumping in his jaw. "You didn't have to defend me." "Yes," he said firmly, "I did." Something in his quiet certainty touched Virginia deeply. This man, who owed her nothing, had publicly claimed responsibility for her welfare and honor. In the short time she had known him, Cole Owens had shown more genuine concern for her well-being than Albert Fletcher had in months of correspondence. "Thank you," she said softly, "not just for today, but for everything since we met." Cole glanced at her, his expression softening. "You've had more than your share of hardship lately. I'm just trying to balance the scales a bit." As they continued toward the Owens ranch, Virginia realized something had shifted between them. What had begun as an act of charity was evolving into something more complex, a fragile bond of mutual respect. And perhaps, if she dared to hope, the beginnings of friendship. What neither acknowledged was the subtle but undeniable awareness that had begun to spark whenever their eyes met or their hands accidentally brushed an awareness that would soon become impossible to ignore. The incident in town became a turning point. Where Virginia had previously seen her stay with the Owens family as temporary, she now found herself reluctant to consider alternatives. The idea of leaving their protective circle for another uncertain situation seemed increasingly unappealing. 2 weeks after arriving at the ranch, Virginia approached Hannah with an idea as they kneaded bread dough together in the kitchen. "Mrs. Owens," she began hesitantly, "I've been thinking about ways I might contribute more significantly to the household." Hannah smiled. "Child, you already work from dawn to dusk. Any more contribution and you'll wear yourself to the bone." "Not physical labor," Virginia clarified. "Before my parents died, I helped manage my father's bookkeeping for his carpentry business. I noticed Cole struggling with the ranch accounts last night." Hannah's hands stilled in the dough. "You have a head for numbers," Virginia nodded. "I do. And I also wondered if perhaps I might speak with Mary about the possibility of assisting at the school. Before deciding to come west, I had considered becoming a teacher." Hannah's face brightened. "Mary would welcome the help, especially with the harvest coming. She often has to miss school days to help with the farm work." She studied Virginia thoughtfully. "You're starting to think about staying in Desdemona, aren't you?" Virginia blushed slightly. "I have nowhere else to go, and your family has made me feel so welcome. I'd like to earn my place here properly, if that's possible." Hannah wiped her hands on her apron and gently touched Virginia's cheek. "You already have a place here for as long as you want it, but I understand needing to feel useful." She smiled mischievously. "And I imagine Cole wouldn't object to having you around longer either." Virginia's blush deepened. "Mrs. Owens, Hannah," the older woman corrected. "After all this time, I think you can call me Hannah. And don't worry, I'm not suggesting anything improper. I've just noticed how my son watches you when he thinks no one is looking." Before Virginia could respond, the kitchen door opened and Cole entered, his shirt damp with sweat from morning chores. He paused, sensing the sudden tension in the room. "Am I interrupting?" he asked. "Just women's talk," Hannah replied innocently. "Virginia has offered to help with the ranch accounts and perhaps assist Mary at the school." Cole's eyebrows rose. You understand bookkeeping, Virginia nodded, oddly nervous under his intense gaze. My father taught me. I managed his accounts for several years. A slow smile spread across Cole's face, transforming his features. Miss Reynolds, if you can make sense of my disorganized figures, I'll be forever in your debt. That evening, after dinner, Virginia sat with Cole at the kitchen table, poring over ledgers by lamplight while the rest of the family retired to the parlor. The ranch accounts were indeed in disarray, not from any lack of intelligence on Cole's part, but from the haphazard system he had developed. You're keeping track of 3 different things in one column, Virginia pointed out, her finger tracing the entries. If we separate them, you'll have a clearer picture of expenses versus income. Cole watched her work, fascinated by her quick mind and the gentle confidence with which she reorganized his chaotic numbers. Where did you learn to do this so well? Virginia smiled, enjoying his admiration. Pittsburgh wasn't all factories and smoke. My father had a thriving business making fine furniture. He believed his daughter should be as educated as any son would be. He sounds like a remarkable man. He was, Virginia said softly, a familiar sadness touching her eyes. Both my parents were. They would have loved this country, I think. The openness of it. Cole hesitated, then asked, Would you tell me about them? And your brother? Sometimes speaking of those we've lost keeps them with us a little longer. Virginia set down her pencil, surprised by his request. No one had asked about her family since their passing, as if people feared mentioning them would cause her more pain. My father, Edward Reynolds, was the finest craftsman in our neighborhood. He could look at a piece of wood and see the table or chair hidden inside it. My mother, Catherine, had the most beautiful singing voice. She taught piano to neighborhood children. Virginia's expression softened with memories. My brother William was younger than me by 4 years. He was studying to become a doctor before. When her voice faltered, Cole reached across the table and briefly touched her hand. They sound like good people who raised a remarkable daughter. The simple compliment and his understanding touched Virginia deeply. What about your father? She asked. Hannah speaks of him with such fondness. Cole leaned back in his chair, his face thoughtful in the warm lamplight. James Owens was the stubbornest man I ever knew, came to Texas with nothing but determination, and somehow carved out this ranch through sheer force of will. A smile touched his lips. He taught me everything worth knowing: how to respect the land, treat animals kindly, and always keep my word. You're very much like him, I imagine. Cole's eyes met hers. I try to be, some days more successfully than others. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither was ready to name. Virginia broke the connection first, returning her attention to the ledgers with slightly flushed cheeks. With a proper system, she said, her voice carefully composed, managing these accounts should be much simpler going forward. They worked in companionable silence for another hour, the occasional brush of their hands as they passed papers between them sending tiny sparks of awareness through Virginia's body. When they finally closed the books for the night, both were reluctant for the evening to end. Standing in the dim hallway outside her room, Virginia gathered her courage. Thank you, Mr. Owens, for trusting me with your accounts and for asking about my family. Cole stood a respectful distance away, his hat in his hands. Cole, he said quietly, if my mother is Hannah to you now, I'd be honored if you'd call me Cole. Virginia nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. Good night then, Cole. Good night, Virginia, he replied, her name sounding like a caress in his deep voice. As she closed her bedroom door, Virginia leaned against it, her heart beating rapidly. She had come to Texas expecting to marry a stranger. Instead, She found herself growing increasingly drawn to a different man, entirely one whose kindness and integrity were proving far more attractive than any romantic letter could have been. Outside in the hallway, Cole stared at her closed door for several long moments before turning away, a complex mix of emotions making sleep seem very far away indeed. The next morning, Mary eagerly accepted Virginia's offer to assist at the schoolhouse, explaining that having help would allow her to better manage the varying ages and abilities of her students. The small school served families from miles around, with children ranging from 5 to 16 attending when they weren't needed for farm work. Most of the older boys will be absent soon for harvest, Mary explained as they walked toward the schoolhouse together. But the younger children and the girls will still attend. Having you there will be a blessing. Virginia enjoyed the mile-long walk to the small white building that served as Desdemona's school. The late spring air was fragrant with wildflowers, and the rolling landscape seemed to stretch endlessly toward the horizon. She understood now why people spoke of Texas with such reverence. There was a majestic beauty to its vastness. Cole mentioned you might be considering staying in Desdemona, Mary said casually as they walked. Is that true? Virginia hesitated. I've been thinking about it. Your family has been so welcoming, and I have nowhere else to go that holds any meaning for me. Mary smiled. We'd all be delighted if you stayed, especially Cole. I haven't seen my brother so animated in conversation since before Father died. Virginia felt warmth spread across her cheeks. He's been very kind. More than kind, I'd say, Mary replied with a knowing look. He rides out at dawn to bring wildflowers for the breakfast table, something he's never done before you arrived. Virginia hadn't made the connection between the fresh flowers that appeared each morning and Cole's early departures. The thought that he was gathering them specifically with her in mind made her heart flutter unexpectedly. At the schoolhouse, Virginia quickly proved her value. Her patience with the younger children and ability to explain complex concepts to the older students complemented Mary's teaching style perfectly. By the end of that first day, Virginia felt a sense of purpose that had been missing since her parents' death. As the days passed, Virginia fell into a comfortable routine. Mornings at the school with Mary, afternoons helping Hannah with household tasks or working on the ranch accounts, and evenings spent with the family in the parlor, where Thomas often played the fiddle while Elizabeth read aloud from one of the precious books they owned. Cole, she noticed, was finding more reasons to be near the house during the day and lingering longer in the parlor each evening. Their conversations grew deeper, touching on books they had both read, dreams they had harbored, and the challenges and rewards of life in the West. Virginia found herself looking forward to these talks, savoring Cole's insights and the way his rare, full smile transformed his serious face. May turned to June, and with it came preparations for the summer harvest. Virginia had been with the Owens family for nearly a month, and she no longer felt like a guest. She had become an integral part of their daily life, her initial awkwardness replaced by genuine affection and belonging. One evening, as Virginia sat on the porch mending one of Cole's shirts, he joined her, taking a seat in the adjacent rocking chair. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, and the first fireflies of the season were beginning to flicker in the gathering dusk. "You've changed," Cole said after a comfortable silence. Virginia looked up from her sewing. "How so?" "When you first came here, there was a sadness about you that seemed bone deep. It's still there sometimes, but not as often." Virginia considered his observation. "I suppose I am healing, thanks to your family." "Our family," Cole corrected gently, "as I promised that first day. The reminder of his words in the church brought a soft smile to Virginia's face. "Yes, your family has become mine in many ways." Cole seemed to be weighing his next words carefully. "Virginia, there's something I've been wanting to ask you." The serious tone in his voice made her set aside her mending. "Yes." Before he could continue, Thomas came running up to the porch, his young face flushed with excitement. "Cole, riders coming. Looks like the Henderson brothers, and they're pushing hard." Cole stood immediately, his expression shifting to concern. "Stay here," he told Virginia, then turned to Thomas. "Get my rifle from inside, then find Elizabeth and tell her to ready the back room." Virginia watched in confusion as Cole strode toward the barn where Hannah was just finishing the evening milking. The peaceful atmosphere of moments before had vanished, replaced by a tension she didn't understand. Within minutes, 3 riders thundered into the yard. Even from the porch, Virginia could see that one man was slumped forward in his saddle, supported by another rider. Blood darkened his shirt. "Cole," the lead rider called out. "Bill's been shot. Rustlers hit our north pasture." Cole and Thomas emerged from the barn, Hannah close behind them. Cole helped ease the wounded man from his horse while Thomas took the reins of all 3 mounts. "Elizabeth's preparing the back room," Cole said, supporting Bill Henderson's weight. "Virginia, can you help?" Without hesitation, Virginia rushed to assist, helping guide the injured man into the house and to the small room off the kitchen that served as Hannah's herb room and, apparently, an occasional infirmary. "Rustlers have been hitting ranches all through the county," Jack Henderson explained as Hannah cleaned his brother's wound, a bullet graze along his ribs that looked worse than it was. "We caught them driving off a dozen head. They shot Bill when he tried to stop them." Virginia assisted Hannah, providing clean cloths and hot water as needed. She was impressed by the older woman's calm efficiency and knowledge of medicinal herbs, which she mixed into poultices with practiced hands. "Did you recognize any of them?" Cole asked, his expression grim. The third Henderson brother, Matthew, spoke up. "One looked like that drifter who's been hanging around the saloon, but they were wearing bandanas." Cole exchanged a meaningful look with Jack Henderson. "How many?" "4, maybe 5, Jack answered. "They headed west toward the canyon country." After Bill was tended to and resting comfortably, the Henderson brothers accepted Hannah's invitation to stay for the night. As the men talked strategy in low voices around the kitchen table, Virginia helped Hannah prepare a late meal. "This isn't the first time, is it?" Virginia asked quietly as she sliced bread. Hannah shook her head. "Rustling happens, especially when cattle prices are high, but it's been getting worse lately, more organized." She glanced toward the men. "Cole's worried. Our ranch is small, but we can't afford to lose even a few head." Later that night, unable to sleep with the tension in the house, Virginia made her way downstairs for a glass of water. She found Cole still at the kitchen table, cleaning his rifle by lamplight, his face set in hard lines she hadn't seen before. "You should be resting," he said without looking up. "So should you," she replied, pouring water from the pitcher. "But I suspect neither of us will sleep well tonight." Cole set aside his rifle and rubbed his face wearily. "I didn't want you to see this side of life here. The danger." Virginia sat across from him. "I'm not so delicate that I must be shielded from reality, Cole. I've faced my share of hardships." He met her eyes then. "That's just it. You've already endured so much loss. I wanted." He trailed off, seemingly unsure how to continue. "What did you want?" she prompted gently. Cole's expression softened. "I wanted to give you peace, safety." The simple admission touched Virginia deeply. "You have," she assured him, "more than you know." They sat in companionable silence for a moment before Cole spoke again. "What I was going to ask you earlier, before the Hendersons arrived." He hesitated, then seemed to change course. Virginia, if there's trouble, if rustlers come to our ranch, I need to know you'll stay inside and keep safe." Virginia recognized the concern behind his request. "I'll be careful," she promised, "but I won't hide if your family needs help." A small smile touched Cole's lips. "Stubborn woman." "I believe someone once told me the West isn't kind to those who stand alone," she reminded him. "We're stronger together, aren't we?" Cole reached across the table and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. "Yes," he said softly. "We are." The moment hung between them, intimate and charged with unspoken feelings. Virginia found herself unable to look away from Cole's intense gaze, her heart beating rapidly in her chest. For one breathless moment, she thought he might lean across the table and kiss her. Instead, Cole gently squeezed her hand before releasing it. "You should try to get some sleep," he said, his voice slightly rough. "Morning comes early." Virginia nodded, rising from the table. At the doorway, she paused and looked back at him. "Whatever you were going to ask me before, I hope you'll ask it again when things are calmer." Cole's expression warmed. "Count on it." The following days brought increased vigilance to the Owens ranch. Cole and Thomas took turns riding the boundaries of their property, checking on the cattle and watching for signs of intruders. The Henderson brothers recovered their stolen cattle with help from neighboring ranchers, but returned to report that the rustlers had escaped into the Rocky Canyon lands to the west. Despite the tension, life continued. Virginia and Mary maintained the school schedule, though now Cole or Thomas escorted them each morning and afternoon. Virginia found that the children's innocence and enthusiasm provided a welcome respite from the adult concerns that dominated conversations at home. One afternoon, as Virginia was helping the youngest students with their letters, the schoolhouse door opened to reveal Cole, earlier than usual for their walk home. The serious set of his jaw immediately told her something was wrong. "Miss Reynolds," he said formally, mindful of the children, "might I have a word?" Outside, Cole led Virginia a short distance from the schoolhouse. "Jack Henderson rode by our place an hour ago. The rustlers hit the Miller farm last night. Took 20 head and burned a barn when Miller tried to stop them." Virginia gasped. "Was anyone hurt?" "No, thank God, but they're getting bolder." Cole's expression was grim. "I'm taking you and Mary home now, and then I'm riding to town. The sheriff's organizing a group to track these men before they strike again." The implication was clear. Cole would be among those riding after the rustlers. Fear clutched at Virginia's heart. "How dangerous will that be?" Cole's eyes softened at her concern. "I'll be careful." "There'll be a dozen men at least." Virginia wanted to protest, to beg him not to go, but she recognized the determination in his stance. This was the code he lived by, protecting his community, standing against those who threatened the peace. "When do you leave?" she asked instead. "First light tomorrow. We'll be gone a few days, most likely." Virginia nodded, struggling to maintain her composure. "Then we should tell Mary and head home. There will be preparations to make." That evening, the Owens household was unusually subdued. Hannah packed food for Cole's journey while Elizabeth prepared extra ammunition. Thomas, deemed too young to join the posse at 17, sulked but helped check and recheck Cole's saddle and gear. Virginia kept busy helping Hannah, but her mind was in turmoil. In just over a month, Cole had become central to her life, his steady presence, his quiet strength, his rare but beautiful smile. The thought of him riding into danger left her cold with fear. After dinner, Cole found her alone on the back porch, staring at the stars that blanketed the Texas sky. "You've been quiet tonight," he observed, leaning against the porch railing beside her. Virginia couldn't bring herself to look at him. "I'm worried," she admitted. "These men have already shown they're willing to shoot and burn property." Cole was silent for a moment. "Virginia, there's something I need to say before I leave. Something I've been trying to find the right moment for." Now she turned to face him, her heart quickening at the intensity in his voice. "When you came to Desdemona, you were meant to marry another man," Cole began, his voice low and earnest. "I offered you my family because you needed one. But these weeks with you have shown me that it wasn't just charity that moved me that day in the church." Virginia held her breath as Cole took her hands in his. "I find myself thinking of you from the moment I wake until I close my eyes at night," he continued. "Your courage, your intelligence, your kindness to my family, they've all made me realize something I never expected." "What's that?" Virginia whispered, hardly daring to hope. "That I'm falling in love with you," Cole said simply, honestly. "I know it's too soon, that you came here to marry someone else, that you may not feel the same, but I couldn't ride out tomorrow without telling you the truth." Joy surged through Virginia, bright and overwhelming. "Cole," she began, her voice trembling with emotion, "when Albert Fletcher abandoned me, I thought my last chance for happiness had vanished. I was alone, desperate. But then you walked into that church and changed everything." She stepped closer to him, her eyes never leaving his face. "These past weeks have shown me what a truly honorable man looks like. You didn't just offer me shelter. You offered me respect, understanding, and a place where I could heal. And somewhere along the way, without my even noticing at first, my heart began to heal too." Cole's hands tightened on hers. "Virginia, are you saying—" "I'm saying that I've fallen in love with you too," she finished for him, her heart soaring as the words finally found voice. "Not because you rescued me, but because of who you are every day since." The smile that spread across Cole's face was radiant in the moonlight. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he lowered his head until his lips met hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. Virginia responded with a sweetness that quickly deepened as her arms went around his neck and his hands found her waist, drawing her closer. When they finally parted, both breathless, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "I'll come back to you," he promised. "Whatever it takes." Virginia looked up at him, memorizing his face in the silver light. "I'll hold you to that, Cole Owens." They stood together in the quiet night, the future uncertain but their feelings clear at last. Tomorrow would bring danger and separation. But tonight they had found something precious, a love born not from convenience or necessity, but from genuine admiration and respect. As Virginia finally returned to her room, her lips still tingling from Cole's kisses, she found herself offering a prayer of thanks for a failed wedding that had ultimately led her to where she truly belonged. Dawn came with a heavy mist clinging to the hills, shrouding the landscape in gray silence as Cole and the other men gathered in Desdemona's main street. Sheriff Patterson, a grizzled veteran of the Texas Rangers, reviewed their plan one final time as the men checked weapons and supplies. Virginia stood with Hannah, Mary, and Elizabeth, watching as Cole secured his saddlebags and adjusted his rifle in its scabbard. He looked different this morning, harder somehow, with his jaw set in determination and a Colt revolver strapped to his hip. When it was time to leave, Cole approached the women. He embraced his mother and sisters quickly, exchanging quiet words with each. Then he stood before Virginia, his eyes conveying what couldn't be said publicly. "Take care of them for me," he said, his voice pitched for her ears alone. "Come back safely," she replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "We have much to discuss when you return." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "That we do." He hesitated, then quickly leaned down and pressed a kiss to her cheek. "Wait for me," he whispered. Virginia nodded, unable to speak past the knot in her throat as Cole mounted his horse and joined the line of riders. Sheriff Patterson gave the signal, and the posse moved out. hooves thundering on the packed dirt of Desdemona's main street before fading into the misty distance. The following days were among the hardest Virginia had experienced since coming to Texas. Though she maintained her routines teaching with Mary, helping Hannah with household tasks, working on the ranch accounts, worry for Cole was her constant companion. Each sudden sound made her heart leap with the hope of his return, only to sink again in disappointment. The third night after Cole's departure, a violent thunderstorm swept across the region. As lightning split the sky and rain pounded against the roof, Virginia sat by her window, staring into the darkness and wondering if Cole was sheltered or caught in the deluge. A soft knock at her door preceded Hannah's entrance, carrying a steaming cup of tea. "I thought you might be awake," the older woman said, setting the cup on the bedside table. "Storms always kept me from sleeping when James was away too." Virginia accepted the tea gratefully. "I keep thinking about him out there." Hannah sat beside her on the bed. "Cole knows these lands better than most, and he's got a powerful reason to come home safe now." She gave Virginia a knowing look. Virginia blushed. "We didn't mean to keep it from you. It's all so new, and with everything happening," Hannah patted her hand. "Child, I knew how Cole felt about you before he did. A mother sees these things." Her eyes were kind in the lamplight. "And I couldn't be happier. You've brought life back to my son's eyes." "He's brought life back to me too," Virginia admitted softly. "After losing my family, I never thought I'd feel whole again." Hannah nodded in understanding. "Loss changes us, but it doesn't have to end us. James used to say that the heart is like good farmland. Even after the harshest winter, it can bloom again with proper care." The two women sat together through the worst of the storm, sharing stories of the men they loved and finding comfort in each other's company. By the time the thunder had rolled away to the east, Virginia felt a new closeness to Hannah, the bond of women who waited and worried, but never let fear overcome hope. On the fifth day, Thomas spotted riders approaching from the south. Virginia was helping Elizabeth in the vegetable garden when his shout brought them running to the front of the house. A group of 6 men rode slowly toward the ranch, and Virginia's heart leaped when she recognized Cole's broad shoulders among them. But as they drew closer, her joy turned to alarm. One rider was slumped forward, supported by another, and Cole's shirt appeared darkened on one side. "Mother!" Elizabeth called toward the house as the riders entered the yard. Cole dismounted stiffly, his face drawn with exhaustion. Virginia rushed to his side, gasping when she saw the crude bandage wrapped around his upper arm, stained with dried blood. "It's nothing serious," he assured her before she could speak, his voice hoarse with fatigue. "Bullet grazed me, that's all." Sheriff Patterson dismounted more slowly, his weathered face grim. "Got 3 of the gang, including their leader, that drifter from the saloon. 2 escaped into Mexico, but they won't be back. We recovered most of the stolen cattle." Hannah emerged from the house, quickly assessing the situation. "Bring the wounded inside. Elizabeth, heat water. Virginia, fetch the medicinal box from my room." For the next hour, the Owens home became an impromptu field hospital. The other injured man, a rancher named Dawson, had taken a bullet in the shoulder but would recover with proper care. Cole's wound was indeed a graze, painful but not dangerous once cleaned and properly bandaged. Sheriff Patterson and the other men departed after accepting coffee and Hannah's offer to send food to their families, leaving Cole sitting at the kitchen table as Virginia carefully finished securing a fresh bandage around his arm. "You promised to be careful," she admonished softly, though relief made her words gentle rather than accusatory. Cole managed a tired smile. "I was. You should see the other fellow." Virginia couldn't return his attempt at humor, the reality of how close she had come to losing him still too raw. Her hands trembled slightly as she tied off the bandage. Cole caught her fingers in his. "Hey," he said gently, waiting until she met his eyes. "I'm here. I came back to you just as I promised." The simple statement broke through Virginia's composure. Tears welled in her eyes as the fear and worry of the past days finally found release. Cole stood and pulled her into his arms, holding her against his chest as she cried. "I was so afraid," she admitted against his shoulder, "when I saw you riding in with that bandage. It would take a lot more than a bullet graze to keep me from coming back to you," Cole murmured into her hair. "I've only just found you, Virginia Reynolds. I'm not about to let you go so easily." Over the following days, as Cole recovered his strength, he and Virginia found moments to be alone together, continuing the conversation that had begun the night before he left. Walking along the creek that bordered the Owens property, sitting on the porch swing in the evenings, or riding to check the repaired fencing on the north pasture, they used these times to share their pasts, hopes, and dreams. "When I first saw you in that church," Cole admitted as they sat beneath an oak tree one warm afternoon, "standing there in your wedding dress, looking so brave despite everything, something inside me just knew." Virginia leaned against his shoulder. "Knew what?" "That you were someone special. Someone worth protecting." He smiled down at her. "Of course, I quickly learned you're perfectly capable of protecting yourself." She laughed softly. "Not always, but I'm learning." Cole's expression grew more serious. "Virginia, there's something I need to ask you. Something I've been waiting for the right moment to say." Virginia's heart quickened as Cole shifted to face her directly, taking both her hands in his. "I know this isn't how you imagined your life would unfold," he began. "You came to Texas expecting to marry a man who betrayed your trust. You found yourself stranded in a strange town, among people you didn't know." His thumbs traced gentle circles on her palms. "But sometimes fate has better plans for us than we have for ourselves." Virginia could hardly breathe as Cole continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "I can't offer you wealth or an easy life. Ranching is hard work with uncertain rewards. But I can promise you this: I will love you faithfully every day for the rest of my life. I will stand beside you through whatever joys and sorrows come our way. I will be your family when you have none, and build a new family with you if you'll have me." Cole released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a simple gold band. "This was my mother's ring. Hannah gave it to me yesterday with her blessing." He held it between them, a symbol of his intentions. "Virginia Reynolds, will you marry me?" Joy rushed through Virginia like a summer storm, powerful and cleansing. In that moment, all the pain and loss that had brought her to this place seemed not like misfortunes but necessary steps on the path to where she truly belonged. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and certain. "Yes, Cole Owens, I will marry you." Cole's smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her all along. When he pulled her into his arms and kissed her, Virginia felt the last pieces of her broken heart knit together, stronger now for having been remade by love. That evening, Cole announced their engagement to his family over dinner. Though it came as no surprise to Hannah, Mary and Elizabeth squealed with delight while Thomas grinned and clapped his cousin on the shoulder. "About time," Hannah said, wiping away happy tears. "Though I would have preferred you waited until your arm was fully healed before proposing on bended knee." "Who says I didn't?" Cole asked with a wink at Virginia, making her blush. The following Sunday, Virginia stood once again in Desdemona's small church, but this time, she wasn't alone. Cole stood beside her, his hand warm and steady around hers as Reverend Daniels announced their engagement to the congregation. Instead of empty pews, She was surrounded by neighbors and friends who had come to accept her as one of their own over the past months. Mrs. Daniels approached after the service, her eyes twinkling. "Well, Miss Reynolds, it seems your arrival in our town was providential after all, though not in the way any of us expected." Virginia smiled, leaning slightly into Cole's solid presence beside her. "God works in mysterious ways, Mrs. Daniels. Indeed he does, child. Indeed he does." As summer progressed toward autumn, wedding preparations began in earnest. Hannah and the girls helped Virginia sew a new dress of pale blue silk, a gift from Cole, who had ordered the fabric specially from Dallas. Virginia insisted on a simple ceremony, with no desire to replicate the elaborate wedding that had never happened with Albert Fletcher. "Just family and close friends," she told Cole as they discussed plans. "And this time, I know the groom will be there." Cole smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Wild horses couldn't keep me away." As word of their engagement spread, Virginia received an unexpected letter from Pittsburgh, her father's former business partner, responding to a letter she had sent months earlier informing him of her parents' passing. To her surprise, he wrote that her father had owned a small interest in the business that had continued to generate income. There was a modest sum being held for her, which he would forward to her upon confirmation of her whereabouts. "It's not a fortune," Virginia told Cole as they read the letter together on the porch, "but it's enough to help with improvements to the ranch. Perhaps expand the cattle herd or repair the north pasture fencing properly." Cole looked at her with wonder. "You'd put your inheritance into the ranch?" Virginia smiled, touching his face gently. "It will be my home too, won't it? Besides, my father would approve of investing in our future together." Cole captured her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "You continue to amaze me, Virginia Reynolds." "Soon to be Virginia Owens," she reminded him with a smile. The day before their wedding, Cole took Virginia to a special place he had discovered years earlier, a secluded pond fed by a natural spring, surrounded by cottonwood trees that were just beginning to turn golden with autumn's approach. "It's beautiful," Virginia breathed as they dismounted and walked to the pond's edge. "How have you never brought me here before?" Cole smiled, spreading a blanket beneath the largest cottonwood. "I was saving it. This place has always been special to me, somewhere I could come to think when decisions needed making or troubles needed solving." They sat together on the blanket, enjoying the peace of the hidden glade and the gentle sound of water lapping at the shore. Birds called from the trees, and occasionally a fish jumped in the pond, sending ripples across the surface. "Tomorrow you'll be my wife," Cole said, his voice filled with quiet wonder. "Sometimes I can hardly believe how much has changed since that day in the church." Virginia leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "If someone had told me then that I would end up marrying the cowboy who offered me his family, I might not have believed them, but now I can't imagine any other path." Cole pulled something from his saddlebag, a small wooden box, beautifully carved with intricate patterns of leaves and flowers. "I have a wedding gift for you," he said, placing it in her hands. "I wanted to give it to you privately, before tomorrow's festivities." Virginia opened the box carefully, gasping when she saw what lay inside, a delicate gold locket on a fine chain. When she opened it, she found miniature portraits of a man and woman on either side. "My parents," she whispered, looking up at Cole with tears in her eyes. "But how?" "You mentioned once that you had sent your parents' portraits to a painter in Dallas for copying, but never received them because of their passing," Cole explained. "I wrote to the artist, explaining the situation. Apparently, he still had the originals and was relieved to know where to send them. I had the miniatures made from those." Virginia was speechless, her fingers tracing the beloved faces she had feared she would forget with time. "Cole, this is the most precious gift anyone has ever given me." Cole gently wiped away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "I wanted them to be with you tomorrow, in a way, and every day after." Virginia carefully placed the locket around her neck, feeling the weight of it against her heart, a tangible connection to the family she had lost, given by the man who would help her build a new one. "Thank you," she said simply, knowing words were inadequate for what this meant to her. Cole pulled her into his arms, holding her close as the sun dappled through the cottonwood leaves above them. In that peaceful moment, Virginia felt the circle of her life closing, the past honored and treasured, the future bright with promise. The following day dawned clear and cool, a perfect autumn morning for a wedding. The Owens home bustled with activity as neighbors arrived early to help with preparations. Tables were set up in the yard beneath the oak trees, laden with food contributed by every family in the area. Wildflowers and autumn leaves decorated the porch where Reverend Daniels would perform the ceremony. In Mary and Elizabeth's room, now officially Virginia's for just one more night, Hannah helped the bride dress, while Mary arranged Virginia's dark hair with small white flowers. "You look beautiful," Hannah said, her eyes misting as she stepped back to admire Virginia in her blue silk dress. "Like you were always meant to be an Owens." Elizabeth entered, carrying the locket Cole had given Virginia the day before. "Cole asked me to bring this. He said you might want to wear it today." Virginia nodded, touching the simple gold band on her finger, another connection to the Owens family history. As Elizabeth fastened the locket around her neck, Virginia felt a sense of completion, as if the separate pieces of her life were finally joining harmoniously. A soft knock at the door preceded Mrs. Daniels' entrance. "The guests are all seated, and that son of yours is pacing the porch like a caged mountain lion, Hannah," she reported with a smile. "I believe we're ready to begin." Virginia took a deep breath, accepting the small bouquet of late wildflowers that Mary handed her. "Then let's not keep him waiting any longer." Downstairs, Thomas waited to escort her outside. His young face broke into a wide grin when he saw her. "You look mighty fine, Virginia. Cole's a lucky man." "Thank you, Thomas," she replied, taking his offered arm. "I believe I'm quite fortunate as well." The simple notes of Elizabeth's fiddle floated through the open door as Hannah and Mary stepped outside to take their places. When the music changed to a wedding march, Thomas guided Virginia onto the porch where Cole waited beside Reverend Daniels. Virginia would later remember little of the ceremony itself, only the look in Cole's eyes as she walked toward him, the warm strength of his hands holding hers, and the clear certainty in his voice as he spoke his vows. The words they exchanged were traditional, but the meaning behind them was as unique and personal as their journey together had been. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Daniels declared finally. "Mr. Owens, you may kiss your bride." As Cole's lips met hers, sealing their union before family and friends, Virginia felt a joy so complete it seemed to illuminate her from within. The applause and cheers from their guests faded to background as she shared this perfect moment with her husband. The celebration that followed was everything Virginia could have wished for, simple, joyful, and filled with the warmth of community. Children played beneath the oak trees while adults shared stories and laughter. Sheriff Patterson proposed a toast to the couple, pointedly noting that Virginia had traded up considerable from her original intended groom, drawing good-natured laughter from the crowd. As twilight approached, lanterns were lit around the yard, casting a golden glow over the gathering. Thomas and several other young men produced instruments, and soon couples were dancing on the packed earth beneath the stars. Cole led Virginia in a dance, his arm secure around her waist. "Happy Mrs. Owens?" he asked, his voice low and intimate despite the crowd surrounding them. Virginia looked up at her husband's beloved face, marveling at how this man who had been a stranger just months ago now held her heart so completely. "Perfectly," she answered truthfully. "And you?" Cole's smile was tender as he drew her closer. "I never knew happiness like this existed until you came into my life, Virginia. That day in the church, when I told you my family would be yours, I had no idea how completely you would become a part of us. Of me." Later, as the celebration continued around them, Cole and Virginia slipped away to the porch steps, watching the lantern light flicker among their friends and family. "It's strange," Virginia mused, her head resting on Cole's shoulder, "how the worst day of my life led me to the best. If Albert Fletcher hadn't abandoned me, I would never have found you." Cole's arm tightened around her. "Remind me to thank him if we ever cross paths," he said with a wry smile. "Though preferably after I've had the satisfaction of introducing my fist to his jaw." Virginia laughed softly. "My gallant husband." As night deepened and guests began to depart, Hannah approached the newlyweds. "The house is yours tonight," she said, her eyes twinkling. "The girls and I will stay with the Hendersons, and Thomas is sleeping in the barn." Virginia blushed at the implication, but Cole merely thanked his mother, pressing a kiss to her cheek. After the last guest had gone, and the family departed, Cole led Virginia into the house, their home now in truth as well as feeling. A fire burned low in the hearth, casting the familiar rooms in a warm, intimate glow. "Welcome home, Mrs. Owens," Cole said softly, drawing her into his arms. As Virginia raised her face for his kiss, she knew with absolute certainty that she had found where she truly belonged, not just in this house or on this land, but in the heart of the man who had offered her his family when she had none, and in doing so, had given her everything. 2 years later, Virginia sat on the same porch where she and Cole had exchanged their vows, watching her husband approach from the barn with their son in his arms. Little James, named for Cole's father, had his mother's dark hair and his father's serious expression, though at 10 months old, his serious looks frequently dissolved into delighted giggles, especially when in his father's care. Cole settled beside her on the porch swing, transferring the baby to Virginia's waiting arms. "He's determined to visit every animal in the barn today," Cole reported with a grin. "Has his mother's curiosity." "And his father's stubbornness," Virginia countered, smiling as James nestled against her, his eyelids already drooping with impending sleep. The Owens ranch had prospered in the years since their marriage. Virginia's inheritance had indeed allowed them to expand their cattle herd, and Cole's skilled management had turned the modest operation into one of the more successful in the county. They had added 2 rooms to the house, one for James, and one that served as Virginia's classroom, 3 days a week, as she now taught the children of neighboring ranches in addition to helping Mary at the town school. Hannah still lived with them, though she had gradually ceded management of the household to Virginia, preferring to spend her days tending her herb garden and spoiling her grandson. Mary had married Jack Henderson the previous spring and moved to his ranch 5 miles away, while Elizabeth and Thomas continued to help run the family business, though Thomas spoke increasingly of heading to San Antonio to learn carpentry. As Virginia rocked her sleeping son, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment of contentment. The grief of losing her parents and brother had never entirely faded, but it had been tempered by the joy of the new family she and Cole had created together. "What are you thinking about?" Cole asked, his arm resting comfortably around her shoulders. Virginia smiled, leaning into his embrace. "About beginnings and endings. How sometimes what seems like an ending is really just the start of something better than we could have imagined. Cole understood immediately. "You're thinking about that day in the church." She nodded. 2 years ago today, I was standing at an altar waiting for a man who never came." She looked up at Cole, her eyes filled with love. "I never imagined then that being abandoned would lead me to the greatest happiness I've ever known." Cole pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Sometimes life's greatest gifts come disguised as disappointments." Virginia glanced down at James, sleeping peacefully in her arms. "Not all disappointments, I hope," she said softly. "I visited Dr. Wilson in town yesterday while you were meeting with the cattle buyer." Cole tensed slightly beside her. "Are you ill?" Virginia shook her head, a smile spreading across her face. "Not ill. But it seems James will have a little brother or sister by next spring." Joy bloomed across Cole's features. "Virginia, that's wonderful news." He pulled her and James gently closer, mindful of their sleeping son. "Are you feeling well? Do you need anything?" Virginia laughed softly at his immediate concern. "I'm perfectly fine. Dr. Wilson says everything appears normal." Cole's hand moved to rest protectively over her still flat stomach. "Another child," he said wonderingly. "Our family is growing." "Our family," Virginia echoed, the words still filling her with quiet amazement even after 2 years. From having no family left to being surrounded by love and belonging, it was a transformation she never took for granted. As the sun began to set over the Texas hills, painting the landscape in gold and crimson, Virginia and Cole sat together on the porch, their sleeping son cradled between them and the promise of a new life growing within her. The evening breeze carried the scent of autumn, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called familiar sounds of the land that had become home. "I love you, Virginia Owens," Cole said quietly, his voice deep with emotion. "Every day with you is a gift I never expected to receive." Virginia turned her face to his, accepting his gentle kiss with a heart full to overflowing. "And I love you, Cole Owens. Thank you for making your family mine that day and every day since." As twilight deepened into dusk, they remained on the porch, wrapped in the peaceful contentment of a love that had begun with an act of kindness and grown into something neither could have foreseen that spring day in Desdemona's church. What had started as the worst day of Virginia's life had led her to the best, to a man whose heart matched her own, and a family bond that would endure through whatever joys and challenges the future might hold. The bride had indeed had no family left, but the cowboy's promise that his would become hers starting from that moment had given Virginia more than shelter or safety. It had given her a home where love could flourish, and a future brighter than any she could have imagined.